Do you have a warning for GOP leaders?
Look, I understand what they're going through. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was a member of the establishment 7 months ago. I gave $350,000 to the Republican Governors Association. I'm not supposed to be doing this. You see, I'm supposed to be on the other side writing checks and having people do whatever I want.
So what do you say to the
puppets,
Republican leaders?
Puppets. I say, folks, you know, I'm sorry I did this to you, but you got to get used to it. It's one of those little problems in life.
All right, that was Donald Trump's answer when asked what he thought about the report that Republican leaders are mulling the idea of a possible brokered convention. Joining us now with reaction, the author of the new novel, Duplicity, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, also a Fox News contributor. Well, Donald's pretty good at making news, but there's been a lot of talk behind the scenes. Establishment figures don't like the fact that both Trump and Cruz are doing so well. And it sounds to me like they want to pick up their toys if they lose, and they want to go home, especially after years, in years past, they've said to conservatives, suck it up, vote for John McCain, vote for Bob Dole, establishment candidates. Thoughts?
Well, I think, first of all, you can understand the anxiety of the traditional old guard. I mean, as you just pointed out, your two frontrunners now are Trump and Cruz, who are the two people that the establishment would probably least like to see as the nominee. Maybe Dr. Carson would be third. But these three between them now have 65% of the vote, and that poses a real problem. If you are a traditional insider Washington politician, these guys represent the end of your world, or they certainly represent a big threat to your world. And so you have all this talk, but remember, you don't get to a brokered convention because a handful of bosses want to get there. The only way you're going to have a convention that is brokered is if 4 or 5 of these candidates each do well enough that nobody can get to a majority. That's the only way you get there. And that's way beyond the control of anybody in Washington, D.C.
So even if you don't think there might be some shenanigans behind the scenes, why don't you stay in the race a little bit longer, especially in these states that might split the delegation or in those particular cases? You know, because what sounds like to me, Ronald Reagan wasn't liked by the establishment when he took on a sitting president. And with all due respect to you, there were a lot of people who didn't like you because you took the Republicans after losing for 40 straight years, 40 years in the wilderness, and you were a bold, dynamic, revolutionary man of change. And you kind of shook a few, you rattled the foundations a little bit yourself.
Sure, look, and I actually personally think that it's very healthy in the current environment for the United States to get rattled. I think you have bureaucracies that are absurdly incompetent. You have rules that are ridiculous, and you have national security policies that are a genuine risk to our safety. So I'm for pretty dramatic, bold change. But all I'm reporting is somebody who's been through this and who knows these players. If one of them, either Trump, let's say, or Cruz, suddenly catches fire, they're going to be the nominee. I mean, there's nothing the old establishment can do to stop them. What gets interesting is you have some people, Chris Christie's a good example. Christie's had a very good couple weeks in New Hampshire. He is a great retail politician. All of a sudden you could imagine, what if you had Cruz win in Iowa, Christie win in New Hampshire? First of all, what does that do to Trump's image of invincibility? And what happens going next to Nevada and to
Christie's
South Carolina?
Still at 9% though in New Hampshire. I mean, Trump's in the 20s. That's a long haul from 40 in 58 days.
It's a long haul, and it's 2 months to go. These things can change. Remember, at this point in 2007, John McCain didn't exist. He'd gone broke.
That's a good point.
His campaign was out of money. He had been the front runner. Now he was alone in New Hampshire with one aide. On the other hand, I have to tell you, Sean, I did not expect this, but I am really looking forward to tomorrow night's debate, because you're going to have Trump in the middle with Carson on one side of him and with Cruz on the other side. And I agree with the comments in the last interview you did. Cruz is far and away a better professional debater than Trump. On the other hand, Trump's probably a much better barroom brawler than Cruz. And so you're going to have two radically different styles. And next to them, you're going to have you know, Dr. Carson, who has to recover on national security, has to prove he could be commander-in-chief. So there's going to be a lot of drama on those three people in the middle of that debate tomorrow night. I think it will be fascinating.
But at 65%, you make all great points about John McCain and where he was and where he came and how he battled his way back. Very legitimate points. But this year, one thing has been steady, and it has been consistent. The only people to rise to this level of stature to be in the top tier, and I'll include Carly, and I'll include Ben Carson, and I'll include Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, they've all been outsiders. The one constant has been that the Republican base is fed up. And I cite the Fox poll. I think I've referred to it as the Washington Post poll. The Fox poll, 60-some-odd% of Republicans feel betrayed by their party. That is not, that has been the one constant. So how do you imagine that changing between now and Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina?
Oh, I don't think it does change. I mean, I think my advice to everybody in Washington is don't pay attention to the candidates. Pay attention to the voters. If there are that many voters who are that angry, what is it that the Republican leadership has failed to do, and what is it that we have to learn from where we're going? And candidly, I think having Paul Ryan come in as Speaker is a step in the right direction. I think you're going to see a lot more steps towards change, and I think it's not always going to be easy, but I think you are going to see a continued move in the right direction. Plus, remember, behind all of this are these terrorist activities that are both legitimately frightening the American people and are proving that our current government is so dumb, it's on the verge of insanity. I mean, how could you vet somebody's visa and not look at their Facebook page? As a rule, by the way, this wasn't an accident. This wasn't sloppiness. This was a rule in the Obama administration to not look at social media while promising us that we were going to be protected from people who are on Facebook saying, I love jihad and I want to kill Westerners. Now, that's really verges on insanity.
You know, when you think about ISIS now has the ability to make their own passports. ISIS has a stated plan to infiltrate the refugee population. The Democrats are standing by, accepting them and taking them in. Trump lays out his plan for a temporary ban, seems to be backed up by our national intelligence officers that are saying it's dangerous. And I got to be honest, I think that all of these guys in D.C., including Hillary, have no concept of what real people are thinking here.
Well, remember, the odds are very high we're going to have more incidents. You just had 3 false bombing threats over the weekend in major places. And here's what I'm struck with. Republicans, particularly Trump, but Republicans in general over here saying, look, if I have to offend a few people in order to protect Americans, I'm willing to save American lives by offending people. Democrats are increasingly over here saying, look, if I have to risk a few American lives to make sure I don't offend anybody, I'm willing to risk American lives. That's how big the gap is now between the two worldviews.
Yeah. All right, so tomorrow, before the debate, you get 2 phone calls. One is from Donald Trump asking you how to deal with Ted Cruz, and one is from Ted Cruz asking you how to deal with Donald Trump. What do you say to each of them?
I say the same thing to both of them because I think Cruz was brilliant yesterday. Use humor, not anger. This country doesn't need to see 2 of our frontrunners beating each other up. This country needs to see 2 guys who are potentially a ticket, 2 guys who are competent and smart, 2 guys who care about the country, and to the degree, I predict this, whichever one of them is better at using humor tomorrow night will have a big advantage in the debate.
All right, Mr. Speaker, like you, I'm looking forward to it. Appreciate you being with us.
Great.